Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Yale SOM Finance Online Student Panel. We hope that you're having a great day. It's a beautiful day here in the New Haven area. And my name is Mike Minatoli. I work in the CDO here, the Career Development Office at Yale SOM, and I'm joined by four outstanding students who have both recruited and done internships in the finance space. We'll share their experiences with you. I have a couple of canned questions that we'll start off with them about. And then we'll jump into your questions. So please, if you do have them, please share them in the chat or the questions area. We'd love to hear from you. And the more you submit questions, the less you will hear from me and the more you'll hear from the students. So very exciting times. But thank you for joining us today. As I said, I'm from the CDO. I'm going to give you a quick overview of that and how we work with students. And then I'll turn it over to our great student panel here to introduce themselves to you. But within the CDO, we have just about 20 students. Or 20 employees, 20 staff members that work with the students to support them in their career search. We're broken into two teams. We have a career education and coaching team with about 8 coaches that work very closely with the students one-on-one, doing small and large group programming for students to help them with their search and navigate what they might be interested in here in business school. And then we have an external facing team, which is our employer partnership team, who work very closely with the employers who are looking to hire SOM talent along the way. So very excited to be sharing this time with you and directing some of the questions that we talked today. As you think about finance in business school, there are a lot of different opportunities, and we have a little bit of variety today to hear from students who went different routes within finance. But do keep in mind that there are, as you navigate business school, there are some structured searches that you might find under the corporate finance umbrella, under investment banking, some investment management type opportunities. And then you'll also find very unstructured searches in the PE/VC space. If you're interested in something that's more related to real estate and some other areas of asset management, you might find those to be a little less structured, but a lot of successful students in this space. Again, whether you're thinking about IB, research, corporate banking, doing some kind of corporate finance role in industry, whether it be tech or healthcare. There's a lot of different options to explore in the finance space under financial services umbrella. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today with these students. So before I go any further, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And I'm going to have each panelist share where they are from, maybe where they attended school prior to SOM, and also what did you do prior to SOM? And you can kind of give a brief overview of that. I'm going to start in the order on my screen. So if Jen, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Lawrence. I'm a second year MBA student at SOM. I went to Brown University for undergrad and then worked in consulting and then in the nonprofit space in the economic development industry and then in impact investing before coming to SOM.
Great, thank you. Aki?
Hey everyone, my name is Aki Yonda, also a second year student at Yale SOM. For undergrad, I went to Dartmouth College and then started my career in the boutique consulting and then did a merchandise planning at a luxury retail company before coming to SOM. Over the summer, I interned at Citi's consumer and retail group in the investment banking division. And I'm going back after graduation. And also I'm leading finance club with Melody this year. So feel free to ask any question regarding investment banking recruiting.
Great, thanks, Aki. Matt?
Hey everyone, my name is Matt Yorchuleta. I'm from outside of East Los Angeles originally. I went to West Point for undergrad where I studied political science and then spent 10 years in the Army and then came here and spent my summer at a private equity firm. So I was really lucky to do that on the deal team in a niche market of secondaries. And right now I'm currently interning for a venture capital firm focused on fintech. So I can talk through those, and I'm currently still recruiting.
Great, thank you. And Melody?
Hi everyone, I'm Melody Gao. I'm from Northern California and I studied neuroscience at Wellesley College. Before SOM, I did a bit of academic research as well as worked at Fitch Ratings as a credit analyst for healthcare companies. And like Aki said, over the summer, I was interning in investment banking. I was in the healthcare group at GS, and now leading the finance club with Aki.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for sharing a little bit about your backgrounds. I have a couple of questions here that we'll start off with just to give a sense of why you came to SOM and where you're going, hopefully, and then we can jump into some student questions. So I'm going to start off, and maybe we'll go in the reverse order this time. So Melody, I'm putting you on the spot first, but could you talk a little bit about with our audience why you chose SOM in the end?
Yeah, so a lot of different reasons, but one important one being the mission really connected with me. And I think that's very true of a lot of pretty much every SOM student out there, that you want to do business, not just for business, but also for society. And for me, like having a healthcare background and really seeing how healthcare really intersects with not only the for-profit side, the business side, the academic side, and also just touches every human out there, that was a really important component for me. And I think the way I thought of being a leader going forward was very much that you can't just be a leader to increase profits anymore for a company. Like being a leader really means being able to integrate a lot of different things and sort of doing what's good for your company or whatever organization you work at, but also for the people around you. So that's what I'd say the main reason. And also the secondary reason being I wanted to recruit for finance and possibly investment banking. And all of the students were extremely helpful throughout my, I guess, MBA search process. And I felt like this is a place where I could really connect with others.
Great, thank you, Melody. Matthew, we'll go to you next.
Similarly, I also fell in love with the culture and the mission. After spending 10 years in the Army, I really wanted to somewhat keep my foot in the public sector and doing a public good. I turned down a public policy opportunity somewhere else to come here because I thought the transition from the military to the real world would be, I'd be much better served having gotten an MBA. So I decided to marry those two things together as best as possible. And so Yale made the most sense to me. I also really enjoyed the location. I think, especially with regard to finance, being very close to New York City and Boston. I spent my summer in New York City, and I'm spending my internship right now driving up to Boston. So it really gives me a lot of opportunities to meet people and to experience any other career opportunities that are out there. So for both those reasons, really made Yale the perfect place.
Great, thank you. Aki?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the reasons kind of already came up, but I had three main reasons. First one being the class size was pretty important to me. I went to a pretty small, liberal art college for undergrads, so I knew the value of going to a place with a small class size and the relationship you can build with your classmates and also with faculty. So Yale fit that mold for me, and then proximity to New York, is something that was important to me. I was recruiting investment banking, so I knew I wanted to be able to network pre-COVID. Obviously, I wanted to network in person in New York. So, but I knew I didn't want to be in New York City just because I spent my entire life after college in New York City. So it's time to get out for 2 years and do something else. And so New Haven fit that mold perfectly. And finally, it was one school where alumni really reached out. Alumni and second year student actually reached out after getting admission or admitted to school, and that really spoke a lot of volume about how much care people have about the school and the class that they're trying to build. And so those were the main factors that influenced my decision to come to Yale.
Great, thank you. And finally, Jen.
Everyone else kind of stole my answers, but I realized I didn't say where I interned over the summer. So I was at Citi in the Global Consumer Banking Management Rotational Program. And I think one of the main reasons why I came to SOM and why SOM really appealed to me was because I was coming from this non-traditional background, having worked in the nonprofits and kind of consulting, but like federal consulting ultimately, and just felt like I wanted to be around people that really cared about the and society piece of business school, and who were coming from other non-traditional backgrounds that maybe weren't exactly like mine, but could bring a real diversity of perspectives to the MBA experience. And I found that SOM really stood out in that category. And I think, not to mention, and similarly on that point, I think the culture is definitely a very like self-selecting group of people. The students at SOM want to be at SOM, and they chose SOM for a reason. And so I think to me, that was really important and really came through in all of the conversations with current students that I had when I was looking to apply.
Great, thank you. My next question, and the first question that came in from our visitors, is a very similar question. So we're going to jump over to that. And maybe, Aki, I'll start with you this time, just talking a little bit about resources that you've leveraged at Yale that have kind of impacted your experience so far here at SOM.
Yeah, I think the most important resource I've had probably is the student clubs. So for investment banking recruitment, Finance Club takes a lead in preparing students through the process. Investment banking, unlike other field, maybe except consulting, is very structured. And so there's certain procedures and protocol that needs to happen, and certain format of networking that's required. And so the club takes a lead in a lot of those preparations. And so, I strongly leverage the clubs to, get myself prepared for Super Day, and securing an invitation to Super Day. And as a club leader this year, I'm doing the same thing for the first year, just trying to make sure they're prepped in advance of upcoming Super Week that's coming up very soon. And then in addition to clubs, obviously CDO plays a significant role in helping you with whether it's just structuring your behavioral answers or cover letter resume. And so if you're interested in investment banking, SOM definitely have more than enough resource to get you prepared and to go get that offer.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to offer any resources that they've taken advantage of while here?
I'll offer one, and I think maybe it's a slightly different perspective. I came into school not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and had a couple of kind of thoughts of paths that I could take, but not really sure which one was the right one. And so I really leaned quite heavily on the career coaches through the CDO. When I first got to school, I felt kind of overwhelmed when I first got here that everyone knew what they wanted to do. And I was kind of looking at a couple of different options, some within financial services, some within like corporate strategy roles, and then consulting as well. And so for those potential students who kind of have a couple of different hypotheses about what they might find interesting for their career pivot, utilizing the student body, alumni network, but also the career coaches to kind of level set and kind of set your mind at ease and kind of help you navigate all of the various career paths that are open to you was really, really important for my search as well.
Great, thank you, Jenny.
I just have something really quick to add, which I think I sort of overlooked when I was the first year, but now like seeing other friends go to other business schools, I feel like it's actually a huge benefit of SOM is you can join whatever club you want. And you can be a part of every club if you wanted to and go to all of their events and sessions. And I think that's really great. Especially if you have maybe a couple different options, like Jen was saying that you're considering. So you can join Finance Club and see what IB is about. You can join PEVC Club, understand what that's about, or Investment Management Club, FinTech Club. So you can do all of that and really be able to get like a complete picture of what really interests you.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question from students. And this is actually a question that I always enjoy hearing the answers to, but wondering if anyone has taken and engaged in any courses outside of SOM in the greater Yale community, and what courses those are, and any that you might recommend for a student coming in to potentially take a look at. And I'll open it to anybody that wants to answer. I guess we should start with, oh, has anyone? Okay, Melody, there we go.
So I've taken, I don't know if this necessarily qualifies, but a lot of cross-registered courses with the law school as well as the School of Public Health. I'm going into sort of the healthcare industry. So it made sense that I would take a lot of these healthcare courses. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity at SOM to sort of do what I'm doing, which is taking cross-registered courses. And you can also like actually just take courses at other schools that are not necessarily cross-registered with SOM. And I guess I think what's great about it is you get the two different perspectives. So on one side, the very business perspective, but I'm taking a course on regulations, and we spent a lot of time talking about how regulations actually created, what the US system looks like. And we have guest speakers that are professors from the law school or people who have previously written regulations come into our class to discuss. And also for my healthcare related classes, we have I took one really interesting one on biotech companies. So obviously like there's a finance component to it, as well as a business component, but also a lot of science, and having a bunch of CEOs and CSOs come in to talk to us about how they sort of navigated that journey.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in with any courses they've taken at the greater university?
I'll jump in. So you have to have a leadership course to graduate, and I chose one at the Jackson Institute. So that's actually a Friday class, which most people kind of don't love, but it's just such a really interesting course. It's ethical choices for public leadership, and it's a small 20-person class, and we kind of go through real life ethical situations that leaders at various levels have had to come to terms with, and how to work through those problems. So it's a really different lens to look through problem solving, as well as kind of challenges us to always consider the impact on society when we're making decisions. So it's been really enjoyable.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to move on with the questions here, and we can always come back to that if there's others. There was a question that came in from a student asking about pivoting your career to finance, and without any industry background, how difficult can that be? Matt, you're sort of smiling. I was going to pick on you anyway. Maybe you want to jump in here.
Yeah, so it's extremely difficult depending on what you want to go through. So if you're really smart, you can go to Aki and the IB Club, and they're going to teach you everything you need to do, and you're going to crush it, and you can go into investment banking. If you're not quite able to keep up with them because they're so smart, then you kind of go my route and use my leverage, just networking. So before I left the military and prior to coming to SOM, I joined as many different organizations, MBA fellowships that I could qualify for and that would take me. And looking at it from the perspective of, being able to meet people and talk to people, I can, one, learn what I want to do when I grow up, right? And then two, as well, understand what I don't want to do, and then figure out the ways that I can kind of leverage my experience and my network to my benefit. So it's to that point, it's extremely difficult to do it without a background in it. You really have to leverage a network. I talked to probably 100 professionals in private equity that said, hey, go be an investment banker, go do consulting, and then we'll talk. So it's pretty frustrating, but all it takes is that one yes. And I was able to leverage that. And then once you have something on your resume, it's really helpful. So look at, pre-MBA opportunities that you can find to intern, during the school year internships. Really don't hold yourself back to anything that you might be available to you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge of the, some of the unstructured recruiting. I think those do require a little more experience beforehand, and that's going to be advantageous. For investment banking, just because this process is very structured, and also because a lot of people going into an associate program are career changers, background helps, especially if you're an accountant, for instance, you might have a leg up on some of the technical questions, but it's definitely not a barrier. I come with no financial background. I had more of an operational background, and was able to quickly catch up on a lot of technicals, and finally get an offer at the end. So If you're thinking about investment banking specifically, as a background, probably is not most relevant. Although you probably want to spend some time before coming to SOM, just taking courses online or something, just reviewing material, just so you're familiar. And you just have to have a really strong reason why you want to go into investment banking. You have to understand what the industry is if you're planning to go into it, and just have a compelling story for why, even though you don't have a financial background, you're interested in investment banking and you think it will be a fit for the firm.
Thank you, Aki. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh yeah, I was just going to echo that. Even from the kind of rotational side of things, the management programs. Really like no finance background is required, and I was kind of shocked to see that I was in like similar my cohort was very like similar to me and had very diverse backgrounds from a number of different industries. So I think what Aki was saying, I'll just echo, which is the why and the story behind what is drawing you to that particular organization and program, et cetera, and what you're hoping to get out of it is really the most important and compelling thing. And then you can build like how your past experience kind of fits into that. But the story is the most important piece for me.
Thank you. Jen, I did have a specific question here for you from one of our watchers today. You had mentioned your experience coming in from the impact investing space, and was there a thought to continue to go back into that space? Or were you looking to pivot? And then if you were looking, what type of opportunities did you see?
Yeah, so I'm kind of the odd one out in the impact investing space, I feel like. I was working at a nonprofit that was not an investor, but instead kind of an industry body for impact investors. And from that experience, I learned that I did not want to be an investor. And so I decided to pivot away from impact investing, not because I wasn't interested in the mission orientation, but because I didn't feel like the day-to-day was really suitable to what I was interested in. So I actually wasn't recruiting at all for impact investing. That being said, I think, interest in that space is growing in wherever you find yourself. And so even in my internship this summer, though it was in the consumer side of banking, I was able to leverage my past experience in impact investing and sustainability. And that perspective was actually, the bank was really excited to have my perspective, even though that wasn't my kind of day job. So it gives me hope that I'll be able to continue kind of bringing that perspective to whatever job I'm going into. But I decided to kind of go a more traditional route, at least for the time being. So.
Good stuff. Thank you. Matt, I might address this question to you. I know a couple of you have mentioned our location as a great spot between Boston and New York and the opportunities that exist. But there is a question here about in-semester internships and how you balance taking up a work experience like that, and also obviously the point we come here to the academic side. So Matt, I don't know if you have anything to share on how you're doing that right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I will say as a second year, you have a lot more, you have all the freedom to set up your own schedule. So I was able to do it where I have classes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I intern Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm also married with a son, so that makes it especially challenging to kind of balance everything. But you can schedule it so that you are either overloading a quarter or a semester and then kind of adjust it the next time around. So I've tried to kind of take as many classes as possible early on, so it kind of frees me up. And I'm already thinking to next semester to make sure I have a couple of days available to do either something internship or part-time if that becomes available. But it's really just I don't know if it's also a virtue of you're taking classes that you specifically chose and therefore you like really enjoy them. A lot of them end up being group projects, so it makes it a little easier to like work together and find time, split up work. And maybe just being better at kind of scheduling after the year of being a first year. So everybody's helpful, and that culture here is that like everybody understands if like, hey, I have to do bedtime, we'll move a meeting, and it makes it really accessible to get things done. So it's a really good culture here from both students and faculty.
Thanks. I was going to pass this one to Melody. Melody, I was wondering if you had anything to add to the a question came in of resources available for finding global jobs in the finance space. So maybe some of the things that the club works with.
Yeah, I guess more local things. I think this is where alums often come into play because they might be hiring directly from SOM and also maybe do some like in-semester internships. Also more locally, like as a lot of people mentioned, we're situated in a pretty good spot. Like even though we're not exactly in New York City, there's a lot of financial services roles here in Connecticut too. So all the time, like on the Slack channels, I'm seeing people post new finance related jobs, either for internships, full-time offers, in-semester internships for funds that are in Connecticut. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and also the alums play a pretty big role, I think, in helping you get those jobs.
Thanks. And the club also works, I don't know if you, either Aki or Melody wants to jump in, for students that are interested in investment banking in London or Hong Kong, there are some pathways to that. I don't know if you all want to, if anybody wants to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have alumni and, we have connections with different employers throughout, the global financial hubs. So we do send about 1 or 2 people every year to Hong Kong, London, and then San Francisco now being a hotbed for the tech and healthcare groups. So yeah, it's definitely possible, and it happens. I think it just requires a little bit of tweaking on the process. A lot of our recruiting is definitely geared toward New York. So you'll probably do the similar process, but then, as you go forward, you kind of veer towards, the target location if you have one.
Great. Thanks. I like this question, so I'm going to open it to all or anybody that wants to answer. Could you provide an example of a peer or alumni that you've met at SOM that had a job similar to what you want, and how helpful have you found those connections to be? So I guess under the guise of networking with others where you saw an interesting role, and how did you connect with that person and kind of navigate a relationship? Anyone want to jump in? No.
I mean, I can start with this. My answer is probably not going to be as exciting as Matt's or Jen's, but again, the investment banking is very structured. It's a whole process is designed through the idea of networking. So depending on a bank, you might be talking to 10 to 15 different people, majority of them being an alum. And so, obviously you want to network, and if there's a good connection, then, they'll be the one that's going to be pushing you through the firm. And also kind of giving you advice on both the recruiting, but also, the pros and cons of being an investment banker at a specific firm in a specific group. You get a lot of intel through that. And alums are really surprisingly very supportive. Even after outside of the formal coffee chat setting, sometimes they'll randomly reach out and be like, hey, do you want to just chat a little bit? And they'll be willing to give you a little more advice and things like that. So I think the alums are really invested in the success of students. And I really felt that being here at SOM.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything?
Say there's kind of like 2 people that come to my mind in this question. The first is, so the rotational programs aren't nearly as structured as investment banking. And I relied very, very heavily on the couple of students who worked in financial services at rotational programs over the summer before I had started school. And so those students were major resources to me in terms of deadlines and what coffee chat, like networking I should be doing and coffee chats I should be having at what times, what preparing for interviews, what the interviews were going to be like. They were really so valuable and were excited to help and share their experience. So I think that like the second years are just like ready to help first years kind of navigate the waters of finding an internship, and I really like leverage that quite a lot. And then the other thing I would say to Aki's point, like the alumni network really is excited and loves talking to other SOM students. So there were definitely a couple of folks who went to SOM who were at full-time, the program that I was doing at City, who were jazzed that I was applying and interested, and were willing to do everything in their power to kind of help me succeed in the process. And I think that is a huge testament just to how much people value their experience here at SOM and want to give back to the school even after they're no longer here.
Yeah, I guess I can add a bit. Like Aki, my process with IB was very structured. So there are actually so many alums that were so helpful along the way that it's hard to just say like one or two specifically, but just some examples. Like a big part of recruiting for IB is the technical part of the interview. So that usually takes a lot of time to kind of study and learn up on. And so I had alums who are bankers who are already so busy with their own work schedule already, like volunteer to spend hours with me to help me prep for these interviews. I also had an alum who called me like the day after Thanksgiving, and we had like a 2-hour long conversation just because I was I had some questions about my recruiting process and like issues that I was trying to think of like what I wanted as far as like my next step. And that probably wasn't a big issue for him at all, but he spent the time to really like call me and stay on the phone with me and also go through with me like how he thought of it and his process. And I guess the last thing I'll add is I think when we say alum, like we think SOM alum, but I think one thing that's pretty special about Yale is it's not only the SOM alums that are willing to help you out, but it's alums from all of the different schools. So the college, the other schools, they are all really excited to help you out and to meet you just because you fall under the umbrella of Yale University.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. And there was a question here asking about how when many of you have talked about networking with alumni, what resources exist. So I was just going to very quickly share from pretty much day one as a student, you have access to the Yale SOM alumni directory, which you can search and look up different alums by their employer, by their industry, and get their contact information. Obviously, LinkedIn is a tool we're all familiar with. And there's also, as Melody just mentioned, all campus. So there is a system called Yale Cross Campus, which is where Yale alums from across the university kind of house their information. And it's a mentorship platform that you can engage with alums from other parts of the school and find very, I think, useful and helpful alums, as Melody said, across many of the programs here, regardless of what school you might be officially affiliated with. So a lot of different resources to certainly tap into. And then they've all mentioned the clubs, and there's a lot of folks that have passed through many of the clubs who are always willing to help out their students. I'm going to ask a question specifically to those who are representing the finance club. So someone was asking about the preparation that the finance club does. So you mentioned earlier that there was an opportunity to learn finance. Does the club hold classes, or how does the club help students navigate the process?
Yeah, I can take that one. So yeah, the club does a weekly training session on Sundays where we will go through different topics, and that's going to be covered during the interview process. So that's one resource. Additional resource is Yale through CDO offers access to Wall Street Prep. So there's third-party vendor that's available. And then we usually host 1 or 2 in-person event with that vendor to do more of a boot camp to help facilitate the learning. And then obviously a lot of second years are available to constantly do mocks, and we also do a mentorship program so that the second year can help kind of strengthen the weakness that you have as you prepare. And it is about 2 to 3 months sprint, but I think majority of people come out pretty prepared by the time the super week comes around.
Great, thanks, Aki. Matt, there was a specific question that I think we'll direct to you about PEVC recruiting, how to navigate that process, what resources you've taken advantage of. If you were thinking, or could you share a little bit about how your process went?
Sure. So there's it's a lot more jumbled than the rest of, I think, finance. It's a lot more structured. So the bigger firms end up actually kind of looking a little bit further out. So you can probably do first semester and start looking at bigger firms. They kind of project their hirings a lot further out. So it's a little more streamlined. But really what I was surprised by once I got to my second semester last year was even spring two, even the last quarter, was just how many firms came up on the net through the PEVC club or even the finance club of, hey, we're looking for summer associates now. Hey, this is what we're looking at. So you're looking at about 90 to 120 days from the summer, which is really something that you have to kind of mentally prepare for, because as everybody else is kind of locking in their summers early on, it's really hard to hold off and try to wait till that last quarter. But if ultimately that's what you want to do, there's a lot of prep you can do. We do have access to, I think, Wall Street Prep to a certain degree. PEVC Club just had a thing with Elevate is an outside resource that they brought in, and you can actually spend a couple $100, I think it's a year stipend, on different trainings that you can use. So either further training with Wall Street Prep or whatever you can find to help you on the kind of non-traditional side. But then just networking as well, kind of going through and working through. So in fact, the VC gig that I got was through an eMBA who had been working with them from the summer. So everybody's always looking out for each other and trying to help each other out. So it's just a really collegial and a collaborative network and group of people.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. And I will just add, just because Matt mentioned the executive MBA students and the MBA program for executives, we have an asset management program, which is in its first year. We have the Masters in Advanced Management and the Global Business and Society program that bring many international students to our campus. And I think that's a great way for students to connect with each other, coming from all the different backgrounds of different schools, and being able to take advantage of what they might know. Maybe going back to that international question a little bit earlier, to be able to connect with your classmates who are coming from those areas is another outlet to be able to take advantage for recruiting purposes. So thank you for sharing that. I am going to pivot a little bit from some career specific questions to a question that is asking, so far in your time here at SOM, what has surprised you? And I'm going to let anybody who wants to jump in on that question go ahead. And nothing has surprised everybody. It's been the perfect environment.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a stab at it. I think for me, so I think all four of us, enrolled at the time peak of COVID. So, obviously we did not have an ideal first year. But I think what surprised me was the resiliency of the student body. I think, I knew coming in that everyone cared about SOM and, we're passionate about the school and et cetera. But I think that was really put to the test during our first year when, there was a lot of social distancing and we couldn't see each other. But the overall attitude was definitely not that of a defeatist. It was more of optimist and, of that of perseverance. And so I was really surprised by, how optimistic people try to be and, trying to make the best out of the worst situation. And, that kind of validated my thesis about the school that, this is a school where people actually want to be here and really cared about each other's experience.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in two ways. One, I think how truly ingrained the mission is. Like, I'm sure go to visit a lot of schools, go do everything, and everybody's got a culture, a mission, a whatnot. But it's truly like people, get into strong arguments in class with each other, with faculty, and really defend their positions on, hey, if this is not doing it good, or in this case, what is the greater good? So really going through and seeing your classmates do that and fight for that really energizes you to make you realize, like, hey, everybody really truly does believe in making society better. And that's really important, because I think when you take a step back and think business school, you think like everybody's going there just to make a lot of money. And that's not necessarily, that's certainly still happening, but I think everybody still comes with it from a lens of, just wanting to have a good impact. And then secondly, how small the school is, even at 350 people, like everybody starts to get to know each other, and you develop a reputation, and you develop like, expectations of each other, and you get to know a lot of people, and you feel like you know people that you've never actually met before. So it's really tight knit, and that was pretty surprising, even given that it's still quite a bit of people.
Great, thank you very much. There is a question here, and I think I'm going to pose it to Aki for the moment. I don't think any of you are international students, but Aki, I was wondering if you might be able to talk about within the IB space opportunities that exist for international students to recruit.
Yeah, so I think we talked a little bit about the international opportunities. So those are definitely available. But if you obviously want to be in New York in the US, it is, firm specific in regards to whether they will sponsor or not. But most of the bulge bracket, also the larger banks, will sponsor international students. So, so long as I don't think, I think investment banking actually is one of the field where, I think international student can actually find a way to stay in the US. So, we do preparation. I think the process doesn't necessarily change just because you're an international student. Same questions get asked and same technical behavior preparations required. So obviously we'll help you there. And I think we have all the resource to provide to international students.
Great, thank you. I was curious if anyone has any advice. There's a person on our webinar here asked if anyone is aware or any type of courses that fall under fintech or digital lending that would be exciting for a student to take as they kind of navigated their academics here at SOM. And it's okay if you don't. I was just curious.
I just started a new course called the Digitalization of Money, which is taught by Professor Gary Gordon, and there's only been 3 lectures so far, but it is really, really interesting. It's a super popular course. He's a great lecturer and very, very knowledgeable on the subject, and it's cool to be in a class where the landscape is so dynamic and it's changing like in real time. So we're getting like news from him, and we're talking about like, paper memos that are coming out from the government like yesterday in lecture. And that's been really, really fun and really interesting. I'm not sure if there are others, but that's the one that comes to my mind.
There was one about digitalization of currency. And that one was one I bid on, but I didn't get. I'm also taking economic analysis of high tech industry. So we spent a lot of time talking about tech in the payment sector.
Great, thanks. There's 2 questions upcoming that I wanted to ask. So we've talked very specifically about some of the finance clubs that you're all engaged in. Was curious what other activities each of you might be involved in, whether those be clubs or greater activities. What do you do spending your time? And then the follow-up question is also, how do you balance all of these things from classes to recruiting to club activities? So maybe we'll start with the first part of what clubs and activities do you engage in, and then kind of pivot over to the how do you balance that all out. And I don't know, Jen, do you feel like starting?
Yeah, sure. So last year I was a first-year leader of the General Management Club, which was an area that I kind of took the approach of like, what do I not know a lot about but think I might be interested in, and so kind of leapt into those clubs and kept kind of more of a membership status. As Melody mentioned, you can be a member of as many clubs as you want and then go to events in and out as you see fit. So I did that for a lot of the more kind of socially minded, mission-oriented clubs on campus, like Net Impact and others. So the General Management Club was super helpful for me last year, and still involved in it as a member. And right now I'm not taking any leadership roles in clubs this year to kind of focus on other activities. So really just digging into a lot of classes this year, which is super fun. And then I'm also working for the leadership studies group at SOM, so run by Jeff Sonnenfeld. So digging into that and doing some research for him on the side. And I think there's one course that I will give a plug for, which is a course, but YCCI, which is Customer Insights course, is a consulting class. So there's some classes that include kind of a practicum, if you will. And so I'm doing that this semester, and it has been really one of my highlights at Yale, and would highly recommend taking the class if you're here next year.
Great. Anybody else want to jump in on other clubs that they or activities that they're involved in? Okay. So I think we are running up on time here. Oh, actually, can we go to a little bit? I guess, does anyone have any advice on how you balance all of these different things from recruiting to social life? I know, Matt, you talked a little bit about it earlier in terms of the family situation and students stepping in. Anybody else have any advice on how they kind of balance and manage all the activities and events? And by the way, the class portion of this that always seems to be a third.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. When I was applying for MBA program, that's exactly the question I was asking everyone. Everyone seems so busy. How do you balance everything? And what I was told, which I think is true, is there's three things in the MBA program. It's academic, recruiting, and social life. And it's really hard to do well in all three at the same time, but you can actually manage maybe 2 out of 3. So you always have to kind of sacrifice one of the 3, or you like to, just because to make sure you're doing well in everything. And I think what I learned was the most important thing is communication. So if you're busy with academic and recruiting, and if you have to take a backseat on social life, tell your friends that you're busy recruiting. Like, everyone understands it, right? And once you're done with recruiting, then you can kind of go back and focus more on the social and academic. MBA program is short, but it's also pretty segmented by different seasons, right? First year, if you're a banker, or if you want to go in banking, your first quarter it's going to be where you're going to be busy, versus if you're doing like tech, that might be your spring one, first quarter in spring. So everyone has different timeline, but so long as you're communicating and let people in your life know what's going on, it's pretty easy to actually navigate. I think a lot of times when you don't communicate, that's when people get disappointed and you kind of get stressed about it. I think this is true no matter which school you go to. I say, prioritize over communicating, just letting people know what's going on, and people understand.
Thank you. All right, so we are, as I mentioned, closely coming up on time here. I have one question here that I was hoping to have everyone answer as we wrap up today. And that would be any advice. Essentially, probably 2 years ago, you were all in a similar place to where some of the folks on this webinar are. Any advice that you have for them as they approach their application to SOM? And is there anything that you wish you had known at this point in your search? And maybe I'm going to go to Melody first for this.
Yeah, it's always so hard to think of one thing that feels so profound. But I feel like the MBA application process is a very introspective period. So I think the best way for you to sort of stand out in your application, but also for me, at least, it was a very self-discovery process. Thinking through all of those questions really made me think more of what I wanted to do in my future and what was important to me. So taking the time to kind of do that, I think will benefit not only how you're thinking of your future, but also your application. And the other thing being, this was a piece of advice that was given to me before I started. Those values that you're thinking of right now that are going into your application, write them down and put them, I don't know, on a door or someplace that you see every day, because once you start school, a lot of it is very go, go, go. But if you have those 2 or 3 values and points that you really want to get out of your MBA experience or are really important to you, you can kind of let that ground you. And hopefully that can also help with prioritizing what's important to you.
Great, thank you. Matt, anything to add? Any personal experience there?
Yeah, so I'll say just craft your narrative, make sure it makes sense, be specific about what you want and target that. But I think for me, I wish I would have done, and I'm not sure I could have done it, but I wish I would have done a pre-MBA internship in the fields that I wanted to get into. I think that would have been really valuable because it would have given me the ability to speak the language of what I wanted to get into. So I think that's a huge and very important skill and task that you have to learn, is that if you're pivoting, if you're, career switching, you have to learn a whole new language because that's just the basis from which you are learning from. And that's how you have those conversations. So, do everything in your power to give yourself that ability to learn, whether that's, doing an internship or talking to as many people as possible, but really focus on that because, as everybody said, once you hit the ground here, it's you want to do everything. So that's probably my advice for everybody.
Thank you. Jen, anything to add?
Such a good question. I loved Melody's answer, which is not a good answer of my own, but yeah, I think I would say it is such an introspective time, and you do have to know the answer of why you want to be in school and what you want to get out of it. And you need to have that to get in, but like it will change. And I think it's important to remember that and try to balance like the fact that you have these values, you have these goals, but as you experience the program, your interests can change, and that's okay. And so what I've started to do literally this year, but I should have done it last year, was like every quarter, take time to like assess where I am, what I learned from the last 2 months, and how I want to like approach the next 2 months. Because I think people like kind of think of the MBA as this like one big chunk of time that's a 2-year thing, when in fact you can, as Aki was saying, like really break it down into smaller chunks. And so that kind of like continued reflection once you're in school, I think is really important, and at least has helped me navigate trying to like get as much value as I possibly can out of the experience.
Great, thank you, Jen. And Aki, anything from your end?
Yeah, I think everyone already covered some concrete advice towards the admission process, but I say the one thing is that introspection and research doesn't stop just because you got into a school. There's time between getting accepted, especially the round 1 that's going on right now, and when you're starting the program. So take that time to do a little more research, dig deeper, continue to dig deeper, talk to people you've worked with, people that, from your undergrad, alumni from undergrad, make sure to do your due diligence, continue to talk to a lot of people and make sure you know what you want to do. After you get admitted, it's okay to change what you want to do. I mean, obviously, you want to have an idea, but, through further due diligence, if you change, what you ultimately decide to recruit, I think that's the time and opportunity that you have to take advantage of. So I say just, keep asking your question. Is this, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And hopefully that'll lead you to a career that you're looking for.
Great, thank you. So as we wrap here, I first want to say thank you to our student panelists. Very insightful, great advice, great sharing of experiences, both how you ended up here and obviously where you hope to go moving forward, and how you've been taking advantage of SOM. To our audience, thank you for some great questions. We hope that we were able to answer what you were looking for. I know there are a couple questions that came in here at the end that we haven't gotten to, but if you do have further questions, I encourage you to connect with the SOM admissions office or with one of the student ambassadors that represents that office, and I'm sure they could connect you with classmates who are looking at the specific things that you might be interested in. With that, I'll say thanks for joining us today, and I wish everybody a great day.